babies, crack baby. Damn. Mama, she was in the street, so guess who raised me?
Before I say a word, I need you to go find those two records. The first record is by the Dogs, Your Mama's on Crack. I know the title is uncomfortable. The second is Preach by Young Dolph. Rest in peace to Young Dolph, one of my favorite rappers who was extremely underrated, a man who never hid where he came from and built something real from it. His music was documentation. It was field notes before I ever called it that. I'm sure for my listeners, it may have been uncomfortable to hear, but that discomfort is the point because those songs captured something no documentary, no news reports, no academic paper ever could. The texture of what the crack era felt like from the inside. Inside homes, inside families, inside communities that were never supposed to survive it and did anyway. For it was a lived reality as a generation of children who entered the world already carrying the weight of decisions made before they even took their first breath. Feel free to pull up those records and sit with them, because what I'm about to walk you through is the story underneath those songs. The decisions made at the highest level of government, the systems deliberately built, the problems that were manufactured to engineer a specific result. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not fear-mongering. This is not indictment. This is observation, and the record speaks for itself. My name is Diamond Jones, and I am your host. My work sits at the intersection of knowledge systems, financial literacy, and digital infrastructure. I study the structures underneath culture, the one shaping what we value, what we allow to access, and who gets to decide. This is Field Notes episode 5, and I am calling this one Reaganomics 2.0. Because what I'm about to share with you is not what I think is happening. It is what I am watching happen. Let me start with history because nothing happening right now is new. The method is updated, the language is updated, but the blueprint has been used before. Before I talk about what is happening today, I need to make sure we are clear on what Reaganomics actually was, because this word gets used a lot without people fully understanding the architecture behind it. Ronald Reagan took office in January 1981. His economic policy rested on 4 pillars. 1, massive tax cuts for the wealthy. The top marginal tax rate dropped from 70% to 28% during his administration. The idea was that wealth would trickle down to everyone else. It never did. What it did instead was concentrate capital at the top at a scale America had not seen since the Great Depression. 2, deregulation. Remove the guardrails on corporations and financial institutions and let the market correct itself. What deregulation actually did was remove the protection that kept working class families from being exploited by the industries they depended on. 3, shrink social programs. Cut the government infrastructure that low and middle income families relied on: public housing, mental health services, drug treatment programs, food assistance. All of it reduced or eliminated under the framing of personal responsibility and reducing government dependency. 4, trickle-down economics. The official name was supply-side economics. The premise was that if you give more to those at the top, prosperity flows down to everyone else. Decades of data proved this false. The wealth did not trickle down, it pooled. Now, here is where it becomes a racial observation and not just an economic one. Reagan did not just cut programs, he built a narrative to justify cutting them, and that narrative had a face. He popularized the term welfare queen, a story about a Black woman in Chicago who was allegedly defrauding the government through welfare benefits. The story was largely fabricated and wildly exaggerated, but Reagan told it repeatedly on the campaign trail, and it worked. It associated government assistance in the public imagination with Black women, with fraud, with dependency, with a drain on hardworking Americans. That was not an accident. That was a deliberate political strategy to build public support for cutting social programs by making the beneficiaries someone the public felt comfortable resenting. And in 1981, his first year in office, Reagan fired 11,000 air traffic controllers who went on strike, every single one of them. It sent a message to every corporation in America: unions are no longer protected. What followed was a decade-long decline in union membership across the country. Black workers had used union membership as one of the primary pathways to middle-class wages in industries that were not otherwise accessible to them. That pathway was severed. Then there is the HIV and AIDS crisis. By 1984, 3 years into his presidency, over 7,000 Americans had died from AIDS. Reagan did not publicly acknowledge the epidemic until 1987, 6 years into his administration. Tens of thousands of deaths and silence. The communities most devastated were gay men and drug users, groups his administration had no political motivation to protect. The deliberate silence during a health crisis affecting marginalized communities is a path worth noting, because we have seen it before and we have seen it since. Now, here is the observation I want you to hold, because it is the thread that runs through the entire episode. Every time Black Americans find a path to stability, it was identified and then the conditions around it were shifted. The path was not blocked directly, the ground underneath it was moved. Property ownership was the path, redlining shifted the ground. Systemic policy ensuring that the wealth being built across white America could not take root in Black communities regardless of individual effort or ambition. Veterans' benefits were the path after World War II. The GI Bill shifted the ground. Black veterans who fought the same war were turned away from the same education benefits and home loans at the door. Became the path. Reagan shifted the ground, breaking unions, cutting social programs, defunding public housing and mental health services at the exact moment Black families needed that infrastructure most. And then came the war on drugs. In 1971, President Nixon declared it. It was framed as a public health initiative. That was the official story. The real story came out in 1994 in a private interview with John Ehrlichman, Nixon's own domestic policy chief. He said, and these are his words: Black Americans and those opposed to the war, since they could not criminalize either identity directly, their strategy was to link Black communities to heroin and anti-war activists to marijuana in the public mind, then use aggressive criminalization of both drugs to legally justify disrupting those communities. Take a listen.
Nixon administration official has admitted that the war on drugs is all about throwing Black people in jail. He said, quote, "The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and Black people." You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or Black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and Blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
Nixon started it, Reagan weaponized it. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, passed during Reagan's administration, created mandatory minimum sentencing that gave someone caught with crack cocaine the same prison time as someone caught with 100 times that amount of powdered cocaine. Crack was the cheaper, more accessible form found predominantly in Black communities. Powdered cocaine was more associated with wealthier white users. Same drugs, two forms, two completely different communities facing the law, and two completely different sentencings. And then there was the CIA. Journalist Gray Webb spent years investigating and documenting links between CIA-backed Contra rebels in Nicaragua and the cocaine pipeline that fueled the crack epidemic in Black communities across Los Angeles. The CIA's own Inspector General later confirmed that the agency covered up Contra drug trafficking for more than a decade.
One of the biggest news stories of the 1980s was the explosion of crack cocaine in the United States. Webb's story was published on the front page of the San Jose Mercury News.
The central thing that we tried to show, and it wasn't particularly that the CIA knew about it, it was how crack came to be such a problem in America, that it was connected to this Nicaraguan cocaine pipeline.
But also it set off gang wars. Certain communities, like the African American communities, were disproportionately hurt.
As Webb looked at the suppliers of the crack trade in Los Angeles, the trail led back to a U.S.-sponsored war a decade earlier in Central America. Webb discovered the Contras had ties to the crack explosion in Los Angeles.
What is the word on the street now? Have you heard about the CIA?
I want to be clear about what I am saying here and what the record supports. The war on drug was a government-initiated policy that targeted Black communities. This is not my opinion. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a documented admission from the people who were inside the room when the policy was designed. John Ehrlichman said it himself. Former Senator John Kerry, later Secretary of State, stated on record that people on the CIA's payroll were involved in drug trafficking during the Contra operation. The CIA's own Inspector General confirmed the cover-up lasted more than a decade. I'm not telling you what to believe. I am telling you what they admitted, in their own words, on the record. The drugs came in, the resources went out, the legislation locked people in. And now I want to name the result, because a manufactured problem without a documented result is just a theory. But this one has receipts. The U.S. prison population went from approximately 500,000 in 1980 to over 2.3 million by 2008. Black men were incarcerated at a rate 5 to 7 times higher than white men during this period. This is not a statistic. This is a generation removed from households, from communities, from economic participation, and from the ballot box simultaneously. Felony disenfranchisement laws meant that mass incarceration did not just remove Black men from their families, it removed them from the vote. In some states, permanently. Mass incarceration became a voter suppression mechanism built inside the justice system itself. The racial wealth gap widened measurably. In 1983, the median white family held approximately 7 times the wealth of the median Black family. By the end of the Reagan era, that gap had grown. The policies concentrated wealth at the top while simultaneously removing the floor underneath Black families. Entire neighborhoods collapsed under the weight of it. Communities that lost their men to incarceration also lost their tax base, their businesses, their school funding, and their political representation all at once. One policy decision produced a cascading systemic breakdown across an entire generation. By the late 1980s, the crack epidemic had devastated urban Black communities in cities across the country. Homicide rates spiked, families fractured, children entered the foster care system in numbers that overwhelmed state capacity. That is the result of the manufactured problem. And I want to name something that this episode will return to later. When you remove Black men from the household at that scale, you do not just create an economic gap, you restructure the entire family dynamic. You leave Black women to hold everything together alone, and what grew from that necessity the hyper-independence, the masculine energy required to carry a household never designed to be carried by one person. It is a full conversation for another episode, but it is important to name it here. Removing the king from the board is one of the most calculated moves in chess, and in this case, it was deliberate. Some of our grandparents witnessed this in real time. Some of our parents were built inside of it, of a manufactured crisis we did not create. This is Reaganomics. That is the era MAGA points back to when it says, "Make America Great Again." Great again for who? And great again compared to when? I have to pause and say something important. If you are a returning listener, welcome back. I see you. I appreciate you more than you know. You showing up episode after episode is what keeps this going. And if you are brand new here, welcome. You found this for a reason. If what you hear today resonates, follow the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. This conversation is just getting started. Since May 1st, we have hit 50 streams, y'all. 50 streams. That might not sound like a big number for some people, but for me, it means a lot. It means 50 people chose to sit down, tune in, and actually listen, not scroll past, not skip, listen. This is the whole point of this podcast. So if you are one of those 50, I thank you. I genuinely thank you. This is why the podcast exists. Now, let's get back to it. Reaganomics 2.0, the current dismantling. Now, look at what is happening in real time, not through opinion, through observation. The Trump administration did not attempt to weaken the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They successfully dismantled key provisions of it. The Voting Rights Act was passed because Black Americans were being systemically prevented from exercising their constitutional right to vote through poll taxes, literacy tests, and outright violence. Weakening it removes the legal infrastructure that made political participation possible for communities that were excluded from it by design. Project 2025, a 900-page policy blueprint written before this administration took office, that explicitly targets education, DEI programs, civil rights enforcement, and federal workforce protections. We have not witnessed its full execution yet, but we are watching the beginning stages play out in real time across every institution. DEI rollbacks across corporate America, the federal workforce purge, which systemically impacts Black Americans who relied on government employment as one of the few pathways to stable middle-class entry. The private sector did not always offer the affirmative action ruling of 2023, which removed one of the few mechanisms that created access to elite institutions for students the system was not built for. SNAP cuts removing the economic floor and making compliance the only affordable option. These are not isolated decisions. They share an architecture. Now, unlike the Reagan era, where I can show you the documented results, decades later, we are too early in the chapter to see the full magnitude. Project 2025 is not complete. The dismantling is still in progress, and this is the actual most important field notes of this episode, because what I am doing right now, what this podcast is doing, is documenting the beginning stages of a pattern in real time, before the results are fully visible, before the history books name it, while it is still being called a policy adjustment, a budget decision, a regulatory change. But here is what the early indicators are already showing us. 600,000 Black women were disproportionately sidelined from the workforce through layoffs in a single cycle. As we documented in episode 4, Exodus the Most Educated, federal employees who built careers in stability and government roles are being removed without warning. HBCU funding is under threat at the exact moment the broader education system is being defunded and prioritized. And the Voting Rights protection that were fought for, literally bled for, have been legally weakened in ways that will not show their full impact into the next major election cycle. The Reagan era took a full decade for the damage to become undeniable. We will not have that luxury of hindsight this time, which is exactly why I am taking those notes now, because the pattern is already recognizable, and recognizing a pattern before it completes is the only real advantage available to communities that have been on the receiving side of it before. Same playbook, updated tools, layered on top of the greatest wealth transfer the world has ever seen, accelerated by artificial intelligence and an entirely new digital infrastructure being built around us while most people are not looking. Who gets to speak? The question of legitimacy. I need to pause and say something directly. I am going to name two men in this episode: Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, the one of the most powerful AI organizations in the world, and Peter Thiel, co-founder of Palantir, a data and surveillance company whose clients include the US military, CIA, the NSA, and ICE. I'm not calling either of these men villains. I am not saying they are evil people. I do not know their hearts, and that is not my place to judge. What I am saying is that both of these men are white, both are extraordinarily wealthy, both hold levels of influence that shape the daily lives of millions of people, most of whom have never heard their names. And before someone says, well, anyone can make millions today, you can build an AI-generated business from your phone. You can go viral overnight. The playing field is more level than it has ever been. I hear that, and I want to address it directly. Making millions through AI content, a viral product, or a digital business is real. The opportunity exists, and I am not dismissing it. But making millions is not the same as holding systemic power. Sam Altman does not just have money. He has infrastructure. He has government access. He has the ability to shape what AI looks like for the entire planet. What is it trained on, who it serves, and what it decides? That is not new money. That is institutional power built over generations of access, network, and capital that compounds differently than a viral moment ever could. Peter Thiel does not just have money. He has contracts with the CIA, the NSA, and the Department of Defense. He has built the surveillance architecture that governments use to track, profile, and assess human beings. An AI millionaire making content online does not have access to that table, not even close. Old money and institutional power do not operate the same as new money. New money can change your life. Old money and systemic power can change the conditions everyone else lives inside. That is the distinction, and that is what this podcast is about. Knowledge, expertise, legitimacy, how power shapes whose knowledge gets taken seriously, what counts as credibility, and who gets to speak, not just with a microphone, but with the authority to shape systems. Is what we are seeing today a direct reflection of who wrote the Constitution and who it's always been designed to benefit? This is not a conspiracy. This is a constitutional history question. Keep it in mind as we continue. When the credential loses its authority. Now, let's talk about education for Blacks. And I want you to follow this carefully, because this is where the manufactured problem begins to reveal its desired result. For generations, the degree was the promise. You could not build wealth through property. Redlining was a systemic barrier that made that nearly impossible. You could not access capital through banks. Discriminatory lending practices were systemic, not occasional. You could not inherit wealth that was never allowed to accumulate. But the degree, if you earned it, the system said it would be honored. You put in the work, you get the credential opens the door. That was the agreement. Now that agreement is being quietly dissolved. Major companies are removing degree requirements from job postings, IBM, Google, Apple, Delta. The narrative being offered to the public is that this is progressive, inclusivity, valuing experience over credentials. But here's the question nobody is asking out loud. If the credential no longer carries authority, what replaces it and what controls the replacement? Here is how the replacement happens. When the diploma loses its authority, employers need a new way to verify who you are, what you know, and whether you could be trusted. In a world full of AI, where anyone can generate a resume, a portfolio, a recommendation letter, even a work sample using artificial intelligence, the traditional signals of qualifications become noise. The system needs a new signal, a cleaner one that cannot be faked. And that signal is your verified digital identity, your biometric profile, your behavior inside platforms, your consistency within infrastructure being built around you. This is not hypothetical. It is already beginning. Background check systems are being integrated with digital identity platforms. Hiring algorithms are being trained on behavioral data, not just credentials. The question is shifting from what did you study to who does the system say you are? Now add AI displacement into this equation. AI is eliminating the jobs that degrees were designed to qualify you for: paralegal work, financial analysis, graphic design, administrative roles, copywriting, medical imaging review. The most educated are being told their education is optional. At the exact same moment, the roles are being automated. So, what happens to those people? Displacement forces people into entrepreneurship. When the traditional employment pathway closes, the most accessible alternative, especially for people with skills, ideas, and drive, but without generational capital, is to build something online, a business, a brand, a service, a digital product. And that is not a bad thing. In fact, it can be a powerful thing. But here is what most people do not realize when they make that move. Building an online income stream expands your digital footprint. Every platform you join, every payment you process, every product you sell, every audience you build, every piece of content you publish, all of it generates data. All of it is tracked. All of it feeds directly into the infrastructure being built around you, the same infrastructure that will be used to verify your identity, access your risk, and determine your access. The system did not just push you out of employment, it redirected you into the very ecosystem it needs you inside of. That is the manufactured problem, producing the desired result. And for Black women specifically who left or were pushed out of corporate in record numbers, as we discussed in episode 4, Exodus, the Most Educated, the pivot to entrepreneurship and digital business feels like freedom, and in many ways it is, but it is also an expansion of the exact digital footprint that pillar 2 of the system I am about to describe is designed to capture. They did not just change the rules of the game, they changed what the game is and never told you. Now, let me show you the game that is actually being played. The 3 pillars, the system being built, and why it needs you. Here is the question that connects everything I have shared so far. If degrees are being devalued, what verifies qualification? If jobs are being automated, what tracks economic participation? If traditional currency is being digitized, what controls access to resources? And if all of this is happening simultaneously, what is the infrastructure that ties it all together? The answer is a three-part system, and it needs your voluntary participation to work. This is the key. It cannot be forced on you all at once. That would create resistance. It has to be introduced gradually through convenience, through necessity, through crisis. You have to walk into it yourself. Before I break it down, I want you to know I am not the only one seeing this architecture. Edward Snowden, the NSA whistleblower, one of the most credible voices on government surveillance in the world, has been sounding the alarm on programmable digital currency for years. He called central bank digital currencies, I'm paraphrasing here. He documented words as crypto-fascist currency, expressively designed to deny users the basic ownership of their money and to install the state at the center of every transaction. Take a listen.
Talked about this idea that CBDCs put governments at the center of every transaction and give them the ability to revoke money and absolute visibility into financial transactions. And in October, you wrote an excellent blog post where you said that CBDCs are a perversion of the founding principles of cryptocurrency. I think you called them crypto-fascist currencies. Yeah. And, a lot has, which I loved, and a lot has really happened in recent months. So what's your take on where this is headed and what the risk is if we get this wrong?
I mean, the risk is very easy to illustrate. If you remember cartoons, like the DuckTales, Scrooge McDuck, there's one guy who's got a giant vault full of coins and dollar bills and things like that. And if he needs money, like a giant magnet comes out of the top of it and it just pulls dollars out of everybody in the town's pockets. That is what a CBDC is, right? And that's really all it is. What I mean by a crypto-fascist currency is we don't realize that we have immediately been subordinated and collectivized.
This is not fringe thinking. This is a man who had access to the most qualified surveillance infrastructure in American history, telling you exactly what this system is designed to do. Now, let me walk you through the three pillars clearly so there is no confusion about what is being built and why it needs to exist. Pillar 1. Programmable money controls what your money can do. Right now, money is relatively neutral. A dollar in your hand belongs to you. Nobody can tell it where to go, what it can buy, or when it expires. Programmable money changes that at the foundation level. Here's how it works. A central bank digital currency, or CBDC, is a digital version of the dollar that lives on a blockchain. It transfers instantly, is trackable in real time, and can have conditions written directly into it as at the code level. Conditions like this money can only be spent on approved categories of goods. This money expires if not used by a certain date. This account is frozen pending a compliance review. The Genius Act would require all stablecoin issuers to connect directly to the Department of the Treasury. Every transaction, every user, every digital dollar tracked, reported, and potentially restricted. Now, draw the connection to the Reagan era. Reaganomics criminalized poverty through policy. Mandatory minimums, welfare cuts, and mass incarceration created a systemic condition where being poor in America became a criminal status. Programmable money has the ability to do the same thing digitally. If your account is flagged, if the system determines you are non-compliant, access is quietly restricted. No arrest needed, no courtroom, no public record. The infrastructure simply closes the door. You are already seeing the preview of this system operating right now. EBT cards. SNAP benefits are already programmed money. You can only purchase certain categories of food. You cannot buy hot prepared food. You cannot buy non-food items. The money already has conditions built into it. The digital dollar is simply that model, scaled, automated, and applied to every transaction in every area of your life. And China has already built the full version.
All residents here are assigned a social credit score. It starts with a base of 1,000 points. From there, the maths begin. Chapter 2, Evaluation Criteria number 5. Help those in need who are not your blood relatives for more than 6 months. Add 5 points. Regulation number 15. Being a public nuisance. Deduct 20 points.
Their social credit system is not science fiction. It is an operational model that has been running for years. Citizens are scored based on behavior, what they buy, where they go, what they post, how they interact with the system. A low score? Access to travel, schools, certain employment, and financial services can be restricted. Compliance is not enforced by a police officer. It is enforced by the infrastructure itself, silently, automatically. This is also a financial incentive driving this in the United States. Foreign countries are selling off US Treasury bonds. They are losing confidence in the dollar as the world reserve currency. The US government needs a new market for its debt. If millions of Americans and global users hold US-backed stablecoins, this is a new market. This is how dollar dominance is preserved in the digital age. The incentive is real, the legislation is moving, and the average person has no idea it's happening. Pillar 2, digital identity. Who are you? Now, here is where the credential conversation connects directly to infrastructure conversation. If the diploma no longer signals who you are, and AI can fabricate nearly everything else, the system needs a new unfakeable way to verify your identity. Something biological, something unique, something that cannot be generated, copied, or replicated by a machine. That is the problem Sam Altman says he is solving. His project, called World, formerly WorldCoin, scans your iris, the unique biological pattern of your eye. In exchange, you receive a verified digital ID and cryptocurrency. Over 26 million people across the world have registered. The company's staged goal is 1 billion people.
WorldCoin. What it's trying to do is have a validated identity for every person in the world to connect your identity to an address on the blockchain.
For a long time, most people didn't know that Sam Altman, the man behind OpenAI and ChatGPT, how do you prove you are who you say you are? Well, by providing WorldCoin a scan of your iris using a proprietary technology WorldCoin built called the Orb. The process of collecting certain biometric data to confirm identity is similar in spirit to the scans that Clear does at the airport or even the Apple Face ID. Now with WorldCoin, that iris scan allows you to get a digital decentralized passport known as a World ID.
The project has been banned or suspended in Spain, Kenya, Hong Kong, Brazil, Indonesia, and the Philippines because independent governments determined that the collection of biometric data was excessive and the consent process was not truly free. This is not my characterization. Those are documented regulatory findings, and yet it launched in the United States in April 2025 in 6 cities, with new partnerships with Visa for a crypto-linked debit card connecting Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 directly, and integrations with Tinder, Zoom, and DocuSign, meaning your verified biometric identity is now being tied to your dating life, your professional meetings, and your legal documents. You see how it connects? The degree used to be the credential. Now your iris is the credential. And unlike a diploma, your iris is connected to a database. It is connected to a blockchain. It is connected to every platform that integrates World ID. It does not just open a door, it tells the system exactly who opened it, when and what they did next. And the strategy for adoption is not force, it is convenience. You scan your eye because it unlocks something you want. You link your identity because the app requires it. You tap to pay because it is faster. You submit your face because the airport lane moves faster. You have been practicing this for years. Face ID on your phone, vaccine verification apps, contactless payments. COVID created the urgency that made mass adoption of this infrastructure possible in months rather than decades. The crisis passed, the infrastructure remained, and the next crisis, whatever form it takes, will normalize whatever is left. The conditioning happens in plain sight. The San Antonio Spurs, currently in the Western Conference Finals, congratulations, carry Ledger as their official jersey sponsor. Ledger is a digital asset security company. Their own press release states, the jersey patch is meant to remind fans that a digital world, true ownership means controlling your assets, your identity, and your future. Assets, identity, future. They named all three pillars themselves on a jersey in a major Black and Latino city, worn by athletes millions of people trust and admire. The Spurs are also building a $3.1 billion arena in downtown San Antonio. Ledger will have in-arena promotions and educational content inside that venue. The community's gathering place becomes the environment where digital adoption is normalized at scale. The conditioning is not subtle, it is consistent, and consistency becomes normal before most people realize what they have accepted. Pillar 3, surveillance hardware. Where are you and what are you doing? Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 tell the system what your money can do and who you are, but none of it operates at scale without physical infrastructure to make it real, make it reach, and make it stick. Right now, there is a global race that most people are not paying attention to. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, and the US government are all simultaneously building massive data centers across the country and around the world. These are not just storage facilities. Think of them as the nervous system of the entire infrastructure, processing, analyzing, and cross-referencing the data generated by billions of people every single second of every single day. Space-based satellite networks are being deployed for global coverage, no dead zones, no gaps, everywhere, all the time. And then there is Palantir. Palantir was co-founded by Peter Thiel. His clients include the US military, the CIA, the NSA, and ICE. It received over $322 million in government contracts in just the first half of 2025. It is currently being used to build what journalists have described as a master database, pulling together tax records, immigration records, voting records, and financial data to surveil and track people across the country in near real time. What Palantir does is take data from completely separate and unconnected sources, your financial records, location history, social media activity, medical history, travel patterns, government ID, and synthesizes all of it into a unified narrative, one story about you, who you are, what level of risk you present to the system. The name Palantir, which is very interesting, comes from Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings, a Palantir stone is a magical object that allows its users to predict the future or to see what's going on in a remote location.
It was originally created by the elves. It was meant to be used for good purposes. It is potentially very dangerous technology. It's very powerful.
A Palantir is a seeing stone, a crystal ball that allows the users to see across great distances. But the detail most people forget is that Sauron controls what the stone shows. He does not just watch through them, he curates the vision. He uses it to deceive, manipulate, and maintain control over those who look into them. In episode 3, I talk about the architecture of attention, how algorithms decide what you see and what gets buried. Palantir is the same architecture applied to surveillance. This system does not just watch you, it builds a story about you, and the story determines what you can access. Now, I want to pause here because some of you are believers, probably heard something familiar that I just described. In the book of Revelations, the prophetic final book of the Bible, there is a described system where no one can buy or sell without a mark, a verified identity connected to economic access, controlled by a central power applied globally. I am not standing here telling you this is the fulfillment of that prophecy. I am an observer, not a prophet, but I am saying when you read that scripture and then look at what is being built right now, I'm not saying this is what the system will be used for, but it has the ability to do it. Pillar 1, controlling what your money can do. Pillar 2, establishes your verified identity. Pillar 3, tracking your every move and transaction. The architecture is worth noticing. The technology to make it real right now exists. That has never happened before in human history. We will come back to what that means for us later as believers. First, let me show you how all 3 pillars connect. So, Pillar 1 controls what your money can do. Pillar 2 establishes who you are. Pillar 3 tracks where you are and what you are doing. When all 3 are fully operational, you do not need laws to enforce compliance. You do not need police. The system itself becomes the enforcement mechanism. Non-compliance is handled quietly, access denied, account restricted, identity flagged. No arrest, no trial, no public record. The door just stops opening. The manufactured crisis. Every single adoption of new infrastructure has been preceded by a crisis. Not always manufactured, sometimes a genuine emergency, but the response to that crisis, the solution introduced, are never neutral. They are designed, and the design serves specific interest. COVID-19 accelerated in months what had been resisted for years. Remote work, contactless payment, digital verification, biometric check-ins, vaccine apps, all of it normalized not by force, but by necessity. The crisis passed, the infrastructure remained. This is what social engineering calls manufactured consent. You do not force people to accept a system. You create the conditions where the system feels like relief, where opting in feels reasonable, where non-participation feels like the risk. This is also what psychologists called learned helplessness, where after enough failed attempts to resist something, a person stops trying, they stop questioning, they comply, not because they agree, but because resistance has been made to feel futile. The technology to make all 3 pillars fully operational already exists. The framework is being perfected right now. All it needs is the right moment, the right urgency, the right level of fear or desperation to voluntary adoption feel like the only logical choice. We have seen this before in the crack era, in the war on drugs, in every manufactured crisis that produced a specific systemic result for a specific community. The difference now is the scale and the speed. Who controls the narrative? 6 corporations control approximately 90% of media Americans consume. 6. Which means the news you watch, the stories that get told, the framing of what is happening, all of it is being filtered through the same small group of ownership interest. And those interests are not neutral. When systemic dismantling is happening in real time, when voting rights are being removed, when surveillance infrastructure is being built, when digital currency legislation is moving through Congress, the media landscape determines how quickly the public understands what is happening, or whether they understand it at all. Meanwhile, social media has become the alternative credentialing system. Reach determines legitimacy now, influence over expertise, and what the algorithm amplifies is not always what is true. It is what keeps you engaged, keeps you scrolling, and keeps the platform profitable. Critical thinking is being devalued at the same exact moment the system requiring the least critical thinking are being normalized and adapted at scale. While attention is captured, the architecture is being built. This is not a coincidence. This is coordination. I want to close this episode somewhere grounded because I'm deeply aware of the weight I just laid out, and I want to say this clearly. This episode is not meant to cause fear. It is not meant to create panic or disarray. I am not saying this is the confirmed agenda of any one person or organization. I am saying that this is a pattern I am observing. The technology is already here, the framework is actively being built, and it warrants our attention. As a believer, as someone whose foundation is Jesus Christ, my Lord and Savior, I read what is happening in the world and I do not respond with fear. I respond with clarity, with preparation, with intention, grounded living. And I want to return to what I meant in section 5, the book of Revelation, the description of a system where no one can buy or sell without a verified mark, the mark of the beast, where economic access is being tied to identity, where compliance determines participation. For my believers, this is not new information. You have read it, you have heard it preached, and now you are watching technology arrive. That makes the mechanisms of the prophecy not just possible, but operational for the first time in history. I'm not saying we are in end times. I'm saying this warrants our attention and our preparation. What is being dismantled right now is not just policy, it is the infrastructure of collective memory. The institutions that have historically carried Black communities through every previous version of this playbook. Black churches built mutual aid networks when banks would not give loans. HBCUs built intellectual community when universities refused to open their doors. Black Lives Matter created a moment of global consciousness about the value of Black life and forced a conversation that institution had been avoiding for decades. Civic organizations registered voters when the government actively tried to stop them. Those institutions are load bearing and they are being targeted financially, politically, and culturally at the same time as everything else. This is not coincidence. That's systemic and comprehensive. But here is what I also know. This community has survived every previous version of this playbook. Not without cost, not without loss, but it survived and it built something from the ground every single time the conditions were designed to break. And I believe we are in one of those moments again. For Black women specifically, coming directly off of episode 4, Exodus, the most educated, the exit from systems that were never designed for you is not a defeat. It is an alignment, a return to something that cannot be revoked by a policy decision, a budget cut, or a digital algorithm. Your knowledge is not contingent on whether a corporation validates it. Your authority is not contingent on whether the system recognizes it. Now is the time to get your house in order. Not for fear, for clarity. That means the internal work, the daily practices, the I am affirmations, not as performance, but as active reprogramming, choosing a different narrative than the one being written around you every single day. If you want support with that work, I created an I am workbook specifically designed for this season. You can find it at diamondjoneshq.gumroad.com. The link is in the show notes. It means prioritizing your wellness, physical, financial, emotional, spiritual. You cannot build from a depleted foundation. It means building a community with intention, with people who are doing the internal work and the external building at the same time. The system being constructed around us is designed to manufacture dependency. Our work right now is to be so rooted, so clear, and so connected to each other. I started this episode with two records, with a generation born into wreckage of a decision made before they could speak. And I am ending it here, in the present, where a new set of systems is being constructed with the same precision and the same intent, just different tools. Sam Altman is scanning irises. Peter Thiel is building profiles. Project 2025 is being executed. The Spurs are in the Western Conference Finals. Congrats. With a digital asset company on their chest. And the question underneath all of it remains the same question it has always been. Who wrote the rules? Who benefited from them? And who was never meant to be protected? The industrial age rewarded labor. The information age rewarded credentials. The intelligent age is being designed to reward compliance. This is the field note. I am not here to tell you what to do. I am here to make sure you saw it. Because the most dangerous thing about a system this carefully designed is that it works best when no one is paying attention. You're paying attention now.